I can tell we're in cattle country. All I smell is dairy air. You really gotta have a cast iron stomach to be able to finish your meal in this kind of stink. It's not inside the building. It's not like there's a sewer leak or something like that. No, this is cattle country. It's just exceptionally putrid cattle country because, in addition to the smell of dookie, there's also the smell of curdling milk, which is kind of how they make cheese. This video is not about that though, is it? It's about buoys. Oh, I got a really cool thing to show you today. Woohoo! It's a composition book. I'm on my way to my vehicle. I'm gonna sit in it and have me the other half of the tobacco I rolled earlier. I am now out of tobaccos that have been rolled out of tobaccos that were rolled out of tobaccos, or rather cigarettes that were rolled out of cigarettes that I had rolled out of cigarettes. Another bullet casing? Oh no, that's a battery. Alright, so I got a $40 Denny's card, and somebody paid for my meal tonight. That's pretty cool. It helps me out. It really does. All them sandwiches, they do help. They do add up, but they don't get me the help that I need. There's a lot of people that I'm frustrated with because they don't understand the dynamics or how dangerous the situation I'm in. Fucking getting chilly out again. Anyway, a lot of the ideas that I've been working with are around a ribbing framework. And one of the things that I chose, just based on the fact that I like having a lot of different things to coincide with one another. There's three main bodies that work well. One of them is a shark body, one of them is a dolphin type of body, and one of them is a manta ray type of body. I prefer the manta ray. Now, each of them actually they do have skeletons. Just the invertebrates have skeletons that are made of cartilage. Where the hell is my damn lighter? Anyway, in my study of emergency buoys, like I said, I've been studying this stuff for a lot of years, trying to figure out how to make the American people happy as far as a disabled homeless male goes. And the answer is to get the fuck out of the country. But who's gonna take you when you're a disabled homeless American male? Here's a catch-22. There's also the fact that a lot of places won't take me because I was charged with a felony at one point. I was assaulted by a police officer and then charged with felony assault against that police officer. That's stupid. Alright, so let's talk about the Silent Mary. My idea is to have a boat hull that's small and lightweight and cheap to make and will last a long time. And if something does happen to mess it up, it's going to take a lot and it'll be easy to fix. It's got to be something that you should be able to scavenge or salvage the parts for on the open ocean, which means you're limited to trash that floats. Or anything that you can bring with you. Now, right now, I'm using this to signify a pontoon. I'm also using it on another model that I'm working on. Everything's got to be basically interchangeable for right now. That way I can attach and detach it and show how basically this will hopefully eventually I'll pull out the tools that I need to cut everything and make basically a strip canoe that's about this length, and that'll actually replace in one of my models, or in two of my models, what should be a kayak hull like the kayak that's on top of my car. It's about, I want to say 12 feet long, 10 feet long, something like that. It's super short. But there's one that's about 15 foot long that I was looking at. And I was looking at the dimensions of it and how wide it is, and it was bright orange. And when I was looking at the beavers and how big they look in the pictures, when they have a person standing next to them, the ones where it's just a side picture of them, it doesn't have a person standing next to them. It's always at an angle. And it makes it difficult to tell how big these things really were. They were almost 30 feet long. But you can actually make something that's about half that size that'll look the same. Now, another one of the ideas that I had is if you can go 100 feet under the water, you won't get shaken by the waves and things of that nature. Now, one of the ideas that it was actually somebody else who had it, somebody else who was homeless who died, had the great idea of taking those fun houses, the ones that you get that's like a giraffe or a elephant or whatever. It's a little jumpy house that you get for like your kids' parties, or they have them at carnivals and stuff. He thought about having one of those and having it so that instead of sucking the air in on the ground, it sucks it in from up top, because you're going to be out on the ocean with it. He said, why not just turn your fan on when the air starts getting low, and instead of having it so it blows in one side and out the other, you close off one side so that it's able to blow it up, and then you have it so that it's got a one-way valve on the other side, so it'll blow it in, but once you're not blowing it, it'll close off the valve. And that's a great idea, but there's also the fact that it's flimsy as shit. If there's an emergency, what you need to have is an emergency pod. Now, that might be something as simple as a plastic beaver. Now, I want to make this stuff out of plastic because it's easy to find. It'll look similar to what the originals did, but it's not meant to be a friggin' submarine made by slave labor. It's meant to be an emergency housing for somebody who lives on the ocean. As in, alright, you guys have seen those things packed away, right? Or let's say your bike tire, or the inner tube that you go out on the lake in. All of these things, or even your clothes. When you're wearing your clothes, obviously it's not air pressure that's there, it's your body's mass and pressure, but kind of the same deal. your clothes folded up take very little room. The bike tire folded up takes very little room. Or the tire. Or the inner tube rather. Now when you fold this stuff up, this is stuff that is kind of flimsy. If it's a nice day out or you got some easy day sailing, you can put out the pontoons, which on a Beaver submarine, they wouldn't have been pontoons. It would have been a couple of G7 torpedoes or G7E torpedoes, I think. They were electric torpedoes. Anyway, obviously that's for stabilization, but if you get really super rough seas, the last thing that you want is to have the pontoons out. The reason for that is because if you flip over, it's going to be the devil to flip yourself back. So on rough seas, you always pull in the pontoons. And that's one of the great things about the Beaver, having that little indent on either side of it where the pontoons can go in and be far less likely to be ripped off by heavy waves or rough seas. There's a lot of stuff that people were telling me, hey, when you were talking about that idea for using the pontoons going up and down, using that for pumping an air pump. You could use an air pump like that to run a generator. And I'm thinking to myself, yeah, I know. You could also run the generator mechanically off the same mechanism. You could also run a propeller shaft off of the same mechanism. Well, slight modifications. Now for me, looking at the way the Khufu ship was built, and you should look it up, Kufu, I recommend. When you look at the floor plan of it, this is kind of a section of what the floor plan would have looked like. Now when it comes to signals and signal balloons and signal flares, this is where the clown face comes in. We've seen those floats, like the Macy's Day Parade, right? They got all sorts of stuff. Snorlax and Bozo the Clown and all sorts of stuff. Now, one of the first emergency rescue vehicles that was designed is it's basically a plastic bag upside down, except it's not made of plastic. It's open on the bottom, completely open. Now, what happens is you pump this thing full of air, and it comes up to the surface. Whatever it's attached to comes up to the surface. On a lot of old submarines, if you were to take just a 4 or 5 inch wide strip and put some balloons in there with some CO2 cartridges, you could bring yourself to the surface using a compressed CO2 cartridge, or several of them. But that's for in case of emergencies. Now, thinking about that idea and that design, it's modular. Let's say you want it to be a little bit more rigid than something that's just pillars that are filled with pressures of air and then just some canvas walls or whatever, or some net walls. Let's say you want something with a little more substance to it, or something that's a little more rain resistant. Like, let's say the seas are actually kind of nice, but you got a nice drizzle and you really don't want to be getting wet. Well, you've got all sorts of different options. The whole thing is making it modular, making it so that you've got one base design and then everything else is stuff that is all options for it. Part of the reason for that is because some people won't have the same access to some of these materials as others. Some people may just want to use it as a houseboat. Maybe some people might want to use it as a leisurely experience. I want you to type in BIBER, submarine. Now, one of the things about these balloons, right? You can deploy them underwater. Now, since they're open at the bottom, if the gas that's in there is as heavy as air, like let's say you use compressed air, then once you get up to the surface, it'll basically just float you almost to the surface. It'll sit about where the buoyancy level is, about where the displacement level is for you to be neutrally buoyant. Or barely positively buoyant, I should say. Now, if you've got a gas that's lighter than air, you can do the same thing. Like, let's say you use helium, and they were showing this on a helium flare. The reason they made a helium flare is because the helium doesn't light on fire. So they have this balloon that they launch up there, and they have this flare that's actually on fire, and the bottom part of the balloon is a reflective thing, and it makes it so that it basically makes this big shining light that goes all over the place. And now we've got these modern little pods. They're about an inch and a half. Well, they're about the size of one of these things. And they attach to a balloon, and they're plastic, they're lightweight, they're water resistant up to 30 meters and all this other stuff. But the thing is, it's an emergency beacon. It sends out a radio signal, the SOS signal, just basically over and over and over again so people know where you are. It's a little GPS tracker locator thing. It doesn't have anything on it that you can read, but once you've deployed it, emergency services are notified to your emergency. Now, these balloons are because of the fact that the Earth's surface, there's a horizon line, and you can't see beyond the horizon line. If you can have a balloon that goes up, then this balloon will actually carry your signal higher. It'll carry the light higher so that it's above the horizon, so that a ship that's over 21 miles away can still see you. And one of the things with them being able to deploy these things from underwater is that they've showed that this technology already exists. It's something that can be used, can be utilized. It's not a pipe dream. And, I've got flares in here, all sorts of stuff that I could use for testing something like that, although I wouldn't want to. But the idea behind using a lighter than air gas is a really good idea. As far as having an emergency beacon anyway. Even if you're underwater and you've got an emergency beacon that is just air that brings you up to the surface, at least once it's brought you to the surface, it's able to send out the radio signal. Whereas underwater, it doesn't really want to send a signal. Underwater, water just messes that up. That's one of the reasons that the Germans, and also the reason that we have sealed letter orders, is because once you're underwater, you're not going to receive a signal. It takes very specific types of waves to penetrate the water, and they have to be very close. So when you've got an emergency beacon that's up there, and let's say you've got helium in it, as long as it's a big enough balloon, you can actually take it so that instead of you being barely underneath the surface of the water, as long as you have a light enough craft, you can actually get yourself even literally lifted out of the water. Now, albeit that may be with the assistance of bow planes being used as skids or hydroplanes. I mean, that's what they are. They're hydroplanes. But hydroplaning on the top of the water because you've got such positive buoyancy. But that also takes specific gases, the types of gases that you're going to be able to basically create that are out on the ocean. You will be able to create, if you've got the batteries, you might be able to create chlorine gas. That's no good whatsoever. That'll kill you. You can create hydrogen gas. That's no good because it's explosive. and you can create straight oxygen, which is no good because it's fuel for fires. So it's kind of a difficult thing to do. But using hot air, that is a definite possibility. Maybe bringing the air too close to the surface and having an ignition system inside of the balloon, as long as it's not pure oxygen, you can still heat it up and create some buoyancy to it. And we've seen some of those Mylar balloons that are, I think they said one of them was 70 feet tall, even though the balloon was only like, I want to say they said it was only like 12 feet across. And that's because once it gets higher up in altitude, it does different things. But it was a high altitude balloon. Anyway, with the signals, a lot of the point to that is just that a lot of the technologies that we design can have multiple uses. And they can have multiple implementations in their design that make it so that they can be used for multiple roles. And that way you can have one object with multiple options as opposed to a whole bunch of different objects that are all taking up room, all very heavy. When I was bringing out my book, that's because in my book I've got a bunch of stuff like this. You know, it expands and contracts. And this one as well expands and contracts on both sides. Now, this is just small movement, basically toys. I mean, it doesn't mean a whole heck of a lot. But there's a Japanese puzzle box that I always liked. And there's basically like a keystone to it. It's a wooden box. And if you can find the right piece and move it in the right way, then you can unlock the whole box and turn it into a box. But the cool thing about the puzzle is that it's just a block of wood. And then when you reassemble it, you have to reassemble it differently for it to become a box. And then you still lock it in place with the keystone piece. Now, for me, being able to design this stuff and put it together and play with these ideas and have a place to play with these ideas is a lot of fun. But there's also an intent and a purpose in it. Obviously, people who are autistic, people who have PTSD from being abused, people who are males, are very, very highly unlikely to be heard by our society when victimized. And they are easy to victimize because of society's bias. The ones I worry the most about are the ones who are homeless. And since we're being pushed off into the sea and told that we should not be allowed or entitled to any of the resources of the United States, despite the fact that we're United States citizens, well, it really hurts. It really sucks. And we need a place that we can go where we're away from all of that. Now, obviously, I didn't win $1 billion tonight. But that doesn't mean I don't still want to make the world a better place. Just because Natalie Bollinger got her brains blown out doesn't mean I don't want my loved ones to be happy and live happy lives and live safe lives. Now, all this stuff actually goes together to make a few different things that are rather large. I can make basically just shapes. But if you imagine, those things that are lightweight are sitting on top of your boat. It's basically a house on top of your boat. You got 2 pontoons that come out to the side, so you can extend your boat so that it's easily 20 feet wide by 25 feet long. It's not like you're having to use just this little dinky Beaver submarine, or half a Beaver submarine sized thing, to try to go travel in the world in. Although there was a thing on, I believe the guy went from Hawaii to Portland and back to Hawaii, or Hawaii to Portland and then down to California and back to Hawaii, something like that. And he did it in a Hobie, what do you call that? Not a catamaran. It's a trimaran, but it's really just, the pontoons are so small you can't really call it a catamaran, because they're just little dinky pontoons on the side. There's really no room for storage in them. And there's also the guy from New Zealand who did something similar. His was a racing kayak, or a racing trimaran, sorry. But it's a kayak that they start off with Hobie. And then they got a sail for the kayak, and I got a sail. I also know that in order for people to have an interest, you got to have multiple different things to show them. People want to see options. The idea of having basically a submarine that isn't going to sink, or isn't designed to actually sink, that's probably weird to people, but the idea behind it is that that's your buoyancy and that's your security. It's your life pod, if nothing else. If things are really bad on the surface and you do need to get below the waves, there's definitely a way to do it if you absolutely need to, and that's by flooding everything else. Flooding everything but your little emergency compartment that's big enough for you, and everything that you need kept dry, and nothing else. And that's the kind of the idea behind the Beaver. As far as the boat hull on top, it's basically not a boat hull. It's basically just, well, it's all above the water. None of it sits below the water. It's something that's easy to put up and easy to take down, and isn't meant to take the deepest, darkest tempest. It's also something where, if you're going to go out on the ocean like that, even if you don't like people or get along with people or anything like that, it is important to have safety in mind and saving lives in mind. And one of the safety buoys that I was looking at, I've got something similar. It's a glow stick inside of a beach ball. And that's attached to a tether, and it has helium that goes into this balloon, and it goes way the hell up there. It goes like 200 feet, 300 feet in the air, something like that. And it's all super lightweight. I mean, this is something that they were showing, it comes out of a backpack. It's part of your pack gear for a hiker. And I was trying to read the instructions for it, but the coolest picture that I could find, I think it was in like Danish or something. It definitely wasn't English. But I like looking at the different types that there are and learning the risks. The flares that I have them because that's what the DOT requires, but I've also got other stuff that is less harmful to the environment. I've got glow sticks for emergencies. I've got flashlights for emergencies. And if I can find it, I've got reflective tape for emergencies. So, I mean, emergency roadside flares and the emergency flare pistol for out on the ocean, those are like last-ditch attempts. I mean, really, by the time you're shooting flares, you've already lost any electronic abilities that you have as far as GPS goes. You've obviously lost anything that you have as far as an emergency GPS tracker goes. You're in dire straits. You're obviously not in any condition to get yourself or your vehicle to, somewhere that you can get a repair before you die or freeze to death, or your vehicle sinks and you end up dead or frozen to death. You know, it's all stuff that takes time. It's also stuff that I was working on before Natalie was killed, and I've been trying to get back to that. All the money that was supposed to be used to help me, so that I wouldn't be victimized, so that I would finally have a safe place where people couldn't just victimize me, call me mentally ill, and walk away again and again and again. And everybody knows they can do it. Everybody knows that I'm fucking nice. And a lot of people take advantage of that. The ones that don't, I'm thankful for, but they're few and far between. I have non-stop panic attacks, and I make these videos because I have nobody in real life to talk to about it. I have no real friends anywhere. Now, that doesn't mean that people aren't nice or don't do nice things for me. Some people are nice, some people are mean. I've got a $40 Denny's gift card in my pocket. Somebody else paid for my dinner tonight. And I got a reasonably safe place until in the morning. It's Saturday. I should go fly a sign because I do need the money. I probably shouldn't have bought those lottery tickets knowing that they're not winners. But see, here's the thing. If you never try, you never win. Now, I wouldn't apply that every time, but I'm also not a gambler. You know, it's over $1 billion. I could make an effort. And if I don't win, fuck it. So goes life. I've survived worse than not winning the fucking lottery. Now, a lot of the stuff that you guys complain about is so fucking trivial. You want to talk to me like I'm an idiot? Like, of course, when people tell me, well, you know they found Natalie's killer. Yes, I know they found Natalie's killer. I'm not fucking retarded. Kind of the same thing. When I think about doing these things, I do have to think about the repercussions for myself, for others. I have to think about the safety issues involved, the potential issues that could be involved if you go out solo doing something like that. I like the idea of boats. But even more so, I like the idea of people surviving using those boats. And just because I've got something that is, in my own personal opinion, designed better, but it's designed for a different purpose. I'm down to 5% battery, so I gotta end this. It's good to be with you. Thanks for coming to visit. Stay out of trouble or don't get caught. Remember, you are your brother's keeper, and no victim left behind.